Hello, today I'm doing a bridge too far, no tiles connected. As always, I'm doing it on impossible with challenge mode, and just to make it a little more difficult, I did it without collecting aphids. Let's start the video. With an impending flood that will wash us out, we need to grow our colony exponentially. I started with creating a few workers for the nursery and soldiers for fighting the checkered beetle larvae that inhabit the tunnels. A bridge too far requires speed to set up your colony early on. I opened the 2 woodworm chambers to gather the food from them while making 7 workers to run the nursery so that another group of workers can gather the pine cone outside at a later time. Opening another chamber filled with food, I used my soldiers to gather it. I am constantly making food stores, workers, and most importantly, soldiers. Now I use the group of 7 workers I originally started with to gather the pine cone outside. Then, after killing the false bombardier beetle larvae and then massacring more checkered beetle larvae, and after that, massacring more checkered beetle larvae, the first wave of creatures crawl up the mound. With around 25 soldiers, they were no match. First, the jumping spiders were killed, then I tried getting the mantid fly to kill the checkered beetle larvae. Turns out they were on the same team, and instead I retreated and killed the third party of false bombardier beetle larvae and checkered beetle larvae before coming back to kill the checkered beetle larvae I didn't kill beforehand. The day is starting to become night, and I gather the dead creatures I slayed and go down to this magnolia sapling to grab the caterpillars. Time for night 1. Besides the caterpillars on this magnolia sapling, which I already took, the rest of the area outside the nest is worthless since there is way more food that can be exploited underground. I learned this from a few failed attempts, realizing that just like I did for triage and drive them back, that I can get more food underground, and this was no different. Granted, there are aphids above ground, but not only are they guarded by fishing spiders, which I was nowhere near capable of dealing with, but I also intentionally decided to do this aphidless. The most valuable of this underground food is locked in the westernmost chambers, but first let's deal with the false bombardier beetle larvae in this chamber. Killing all of them was a breeze, and using the spare workers, I collected all the food while opening the first of the 3 western chambers. Utilizing attack switching, the bombardier beetles fell, and the second chamber fell in the exact same fate. The third chamber is more difficult, however, as narrow-mouthed toads inhabit this part of the nest. I didn't feel prepared enough, so I went for a different chamber containing checkered beetles. Then I returned back to the toad chamber. The nice thing is that only 3 of the 4 will fight you at one time, since the 4th one gets stuck for some reason. Even then, I made a blunder by fighting in a narrowed corridor against enemies that have an AoE execute, so I lost more food than I should have, but I continued anyway. I've made plenty of mistakes in my no tiles connected runs, and those never stopped me, so why would this be different? Since it was becoming day, or it was already day, I couldn't tell because I was inside my nest, I opened one last chamber with a new enemy. A fully matured false bombardier beetle, killed it and a few other bombardier beetles, in time for day 2. Time for another day of purging the refugees of this sinking island. This time, and now every time after, I'm going to kill as many creatures as possible, but first we need to gather the 3 other pine cones. First I have to kill the mantid fly before using my soldiers to focus on killing any creatures while my small force of workers gathered the pine cones. Once the area was safe, I let my soldiers gather the pine cones. The next thing I need to do is to gather the 3rd pine cone, which is on a different section of the island. Killing the checkered beetles was easy, and after finishing the pine cone, I went south to kill one of the most dangerous creatures on the island, the red velvet ant. They are difficult if you don't have enough ants fighting them at once, since at low health they start stinging, which it does incredibly fast and does AoE damage. I mess up with having my ants split up, from most of them dying from the first velvet ant and struggling with the second. I still remain victorious and gather the caterpillars before retreating to my nest to kill the small amount of creatures still left on the island. Before the next night appears, I collect the pinecone and prepare to fight the little black ants. On to night 2. After a few attempts, I figured out how to get enough ants to fight the little black ants, which was to get underground food on night 1. First, I must deal with the fishing spiders. After killing them, I camped in the area where a new enemy arrives, the eastern newt. They aren't that difficult to deal with, and they die pretty fast. Killing 3 newts, and wondering if the third one was the last one, I go and fight the little black ants. I know a really effective strategy to kill them. It's called walking right past them. Go into the nest where the queen is only 4 tiles away from the entrance and kill it. I can gather all the food, which gives a significant boost to my army, but it isn't over yet. There is still more food required to grow the colony to sufficient numbers. I retreated underground since I didn't feel like I was strong enough to kill the dragonfly. The night is over and now it's time for day 3. I should have opened one underground chamber for some extra food, but I didn't, since I thought the blue skimmer would leave a lot sooner than it actually did. I kept one group of soldiers to defend against the toads that enter the nest, while the other group goes out to kill creatures, first sending my group of ants east to kill the checkered beetles before going south to kill the lynx spiders. A toad got in the way, which I quickly killed, but I was struggling against the lynx spiders. After retreating and regrouping with my second group of soldiers, I went and killed the 2 remaining lynx spiders. There were only 2 fishing spiders guarding the food that surrounded the pinecone, so I immediately killed both of them and gathered all the food. After gathering, I retreat underground since the creatures are rushing to my nest. They all die, and then I go to the large pinecone. I try to quickly gather as much as I can before fishing spiders arrive. I killed a mantid-fly before building the bridge. Since the day is almost over, it's time to go on to night 3. I gathered a bit of food before having to retreat since the fishing spiders showed up. I attempted to disable attack to save a few soldiers, but that didn't seem to work, and instead I should have just kept attack on. After regrouping and killing a newt and a fishing spider, I went back to try to gather the rest of the pinecone. There was a newt that interrupted, but I killed it along with one of the fishing spiders, but the other one went back, which was annoying, so I had to go and bait it into fighting my ants. This is where I start screwing up. You see, I never moved my vast amount of workers from my nursery to my first pheromone marker, so I had a very small amount of ants gathering from the pinecone. It doesn't help that amphibians and other creatures will keep interrupting my path to the pinecone. To make it even worse, the blue skimmer started attacking my ants, so I had to retreat from the unfinished pinecone. I was fortunate that the group of amphibians and the skimmer left me alone so that I could recover after gathering all the food that was left from my ants dropping it. I felt confident enough to fight the skimmer along with a frog that was just there with it. This is the end of night 3, and now here comes the start of day 4. The frog jumped away to a different part of the island, and I caused the skimmer to retreat to this area of the island. Along with all these workers, I brought my soldiers back to finish off the skimmer after they killed the frog. Then I killed the skimmer, which provided me with quite a bit of food. I searched for which pinecone would be the best to gather, and I found the one here was better than the other one due to the other having double the fishing spiders guarding it, along with all the creatures that pile up in this one spot. I spent way too much food that I gathered earlier, and I didn't have enough to sustain my colony, so I started to starve. Even after gathering the food from the pinecone, it still wasn't enough, so I fought this large group of creatures that washed up. The nice thing is that these creatures fight each other when their numbers are too big, so I witnessed a velvet ant that got wrecked by several other creatures. I was able to clean up all the creatures and gather food to fuel my starving army. After a very quick debate on whether I should fight the fishing spiders or not to get to the pinecone, Oh, no way we're getting to that pine cone. I retreated underground and opened 2 chambers to get some more food. Then I opened the last chamber that was underground while the remaining creatures above ground entered my nest, and I cleared all of them out. The funny thing is that I thought I was going to lose here, but forgot that there is actually one more night before the nest gets flooded. Time for the 4th and final night. I thought this would be an easy night since I was so close to winning, but it actually became a bit more difficult than I originally thought. Many amphibians will arrive on this now almost flooded island. This will allow me to gather enough food from their corpses so that I can leave the sinking mound, but I started to starve, preventing me from buying the 3 more workers I desperately needed. I kept killing creatures, but they wouldn't stop piling up. Also, not really related, but I saw a frog try jumping away 3 times, but failed every single time and died. Anyway, back to the fight. My colony was still starving as creatures were still arriving on top of the mound. A frog tried getting away, but I chased it up the peak of the mound and killed it. I grouped my ants up as I was starting to lose too many ants and was wondering if I'd be able to replenish my numbers. Thankfully, I was able to create a bit of breathing room, allowing me to gather the food from the carcasses of amphibians and insects that littered the mound. When I saw I had enough food to build the workers, I took my chance, building 3, and just for good measure, I made 1 more. I quickly bolted up the path leading to the top of the mound and killed the frogs in my way. I'll let the narrator conclude the victory.
By joining their bodies together to form a giant raft, the fire ants were able to ferry the queen from the mound just as the nest filled with water. Their perils are not over, but they've shown great resilience and an ability to survive in this harsh environment. The creatures of the swamp will quickly come to know the might of the fire ants.
Thank you for watching my video. This wasn't the big video I was talking about since that one has been taking a while, so I decided to do something a little easier, which is the video you are watching right now. I also want to mention I have a second channel now called CamSwiss 2. That's where I will now be uploading my full playthrough of these challenges. Please give me any advice to either improve my videos or ideas for upcoming ones, and as always, CamSwiss out.